My wife revealed her darkest secret in Japanese. Unaware, I understood. I'd been married to Aiki for 3 years when she finally got pregnant, and our joy made her break 10 years of no contact with her mother. Konichiwa, her mom greeted. Hey, I replied. The truth is, I spoke fluent Japanese, but I'd always been embarrassed about my anime and manga obsession, so I acted like I didn't understand. Have you ever had that gut-wrenching moment? The one where a single sentence shatters your entire world, leaving you to pick up the pieces while everyone around you laughs in your face? That was me standing there helping my wife's dad, Robert, set up a crib for our baby, and then I heard it. From the kitchen, my wife, Aiki, and her mom were speaking rapid Japanese, their voices hushed but clear. Matt, no, her mother whispered. What will you do when he finds out it's Matt's baby? My hand froze on the screwdriver. It was like time stopped. Then Icky's laugh, chillingly casual, echoed through the house. Kira Bakadakara, she said. He doesn't know he's an idiot. The blood drained from my face. I couldn't breathe. Robert, bless his heart, noticed I'd stopped. You okay there? He asked, concern etched on his face. I let my voice crack, forcing a sniffle. Just emotional, you know, I stammered, thinking about becoming a dad. I made sure to project my voice toward the kitchen, toward them. I've dreamed about this my whole life. From the kitchen, they exploded into laughter. Kawu, poor thing. Yumiu, he's dreaming. Oh, I smirked then. A cold, bitter smirk. I had watched dozens of cheating stories on TikTok, and I knew the only way out of this was to let the snake dig its own grave. The more emotional I appeared, the more free ammunition they'd give me to destroy them. Over the next few days, I played my part perfectly. I'd accidentally leave my laptop open to baby name websites, making sure they saw me. I'd read parenting books loudly, letting phrases like daddy duties drift into earshot. That weekend, we were watching anime on the couch, and a character made this hilarious pun in Japanese. I couldn't help it. I laughed. The subtitle even appeared on screen. Icky's head snapped toward me, her voice sharp as a knife. Why did you laugh? My eyes stayed on the screen. Oh, the physical comedy is funny, I said, the way he fell. Her mother muttered, Sirwa, that was strange. Icky quietly agreed, yeah. Oh, they were getting suspicious. Good. A few nights later at dinner, I decided to twist the knife a little. Robert was carving a roast, while Icky and her mom set the table. You know, I said casually, reaching for the potatoes, I was thinking about downloading Duolingo for Japanese. Would be nice to understand what you and your mom talk about. Icky's fork clattered onto her plate. No, she gasped, then cleared her throat, forcing a smile. I mean, it's so hard. You'll never learn it. Why waste your time? My smile felt like a mask. The game was truly on. The real game, though, began when I got my promotion. Honey, I burst through the door one evening, knowing her mom was visiting. My boss pulled me aside today, with the baby coming. I paused dramatically. I'm getting a $15,000 bonus. Icky hugged me. Oh, baby, that's wonderful. But the second I went to check on dinner, I heard the Japanese. Yugo manyen. 15,000, her mom's voice greedy. Motto hikadasu. We can extract more. That night, I pushed further. I've been thinking maybe I should get a second job, I said. I want our baby to have everything. Icky's eyes lit up. Really? I could do Uber after work, I continued. Maybe sell my gaming collection, whatever it takes. She quit her job that afternoon. Not quietly either. She sent a bridge-burning email calling her boss sexist, her coworkers incompetent, and the company a toxic hellhole. She showed me proudly, like she'd done something brave. Are you sure that was wise? I asked carefully. Who cares? She chirped. I have you. But here's what she didn't know. I'd already found Matt. My private investigator had tracked him down, and he was very interested to know about the baby he'd paid $5,000 to avoid. The family gathering was the masterpiece. I suggested hosting Ikki's extended family for a pregnancy celebration, knowing alcohol would loosen their lips. Tell them about Matt, her mother urged in Japanese after the third glass of wine. They'll think it's funny. I busied myself with food, my phone recording from my pocket as Ikki giggled with her cousins about how she was screwing me over. Some laughed, others looked horrified. Her aunt tried to shush her, but Ikki was on a roll. Mata ninshinshida are, mata onaji koto suru. If I get pregnant again, I'll do the same thing. That's when I made my move. I walked in with appetizers, smiling blankly. What are you all laughing about? I wish I could understand. The guilty silence was deafening. Several cousins couldn't meet my eyes. Just girl talk, Ikki slurred, even though we'd agreed she wouldn't drink while pregnant. About babies? I asked innocently. I love baby talk. Even if I can't understand the language, I can feel the joy. That evening, I scheduled a work trip for the following week, making sure she knew I'd be gone for 3 days. What she didn't know was I'd be in town, working with my lawyer and the private investigator, or that the security system I'd surprised her with had audio recording in every room. As I kissed her goodbye, she was already on the phone with her mother, planning Jason's visit, a new boyfriend she had lined up. The next morning, I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, phone connected to my laptop, transferring the audio files to 3 different cloud accounts. My hands shook as I listened again to Ikki's voice, saying she'd do it all over if she got pregnant a second time. I had to pause the playback to breathe through the anger that squeezed my chest. This wasn't just evidence of what she'd done. It was proof of who she actually was. Someone who saw me as a resource to exploit rather than a person to respect. I labeled each file with dates and timestamps, creating a system that would let me find specific conversations later. The recording from the family party was over 2 hours, with at least 15 minutes of damning discussion about Matt and the baby. I made notes, translating key phrases, marking exact timestamps where she or her mother said something particularly damning. By the time I finished, it was almost noon, and my coffee had gone cold. I called Maria Whitaker's office, my stomach tight with nervous energy. She answered with a brisk greeting that immediately steadied my nerves. I told her I had recordings from the family party and new information about Jason. "Bring everything you have and come by at 3, she said. Her voice was matter-of-fact, like this was just another case, rather than my entire life falling apart. And somehow, that professional distance made it easier to breathe. Maria's office was in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a tax service, appropriately unglamorous for documenting betrayal. She was maybe 50 with short gray hair and reading glasses. I played her selected clips, pausing after each to provide translation. She took notes, occasionally asking me to replay a section. When I mentioned Ikki's aunt trying to shush her, Maria looked up. Any other family members seem uncomfortable. I told her about the cousins who wouldn't meet my eyes. She made a note with a star. Maria explained that while recordings might not always be admissible in court, they were invaluable for building a full picture and identifying witnesses. Judges often viewed secret recordings with suspicion. She warned, especially in divorce cases. We needed to be strategic. My heart sank. I'd worked so hard. But she held up a hand. That doesn't make them useless. They tell us who knew what and when. We can build a legal case through texts, financial records, and witness statements, using the recordings as a roadmap. I understood the practical wisdom, even though a part of me wanted to just play them in court and watch Ikki's face. That evening, I maintained my distant but present act with Ikki. Vague answers about work projects. She was scrolling through baby furniture, asking my opinion on cribs that all looked the same to me. My responses were polite but non-committal. Every word she said felt like it was happening in a different reality, like I was watching a play where I knew the ending, but the other actors didn't. The disconnect made my head hurt, but I kept my face neutral, my voice steady. When she asked if I was okay, I said I was just tired. She accepted it without question. I scheduled a consultation with Wallace Greco, a family law attorney Maria recommended, for the following morning. His phone screening had been thorough, asking about the timeline of Icky's pregnancy when I suspected the affair and what evidence I'd gathered. He'd explained his fee structure and told me to bring financial statements, the marriage certificate, and any pregnancy documentation. Wallace's office was in a downtown high-rise. His calm professionalism immediately put me at ease. He reviewed my documents methodically. When we got to the recordings, he explained paternity challenges were most effective when filed immediately after birth, before I signed any birth certificate. He reiterated that the Japanese recordings would likely be inadmissible and could even work against me if viewed as vindictive surveillance. My jaw tightened, but he met my eyes. I understand your frustration, but I need you to understand the legal reality. Wallace outlined a filing sequence, legal separation, followed by a paternity challenge once the baby was born and DNA results were available. He emphasized that I absolutely could not sign any birth certificate or acknowledgement of paternity forms at the hospital. He warned this would be the hardest moment. Icky would have just given birth, vulnerable and emotional, and I'd be refusing to sign papers. But it was legally necessary to protect myself. I asked about protecting my finances. He advised opening a separate bank account and documenting all marital expenses. As a spouse, before any separation filing, I had the legal right to transfer half of our joint savings into my own account. Do that immediately, he stressed, to prevent Icky from draining the accounts once she realizes you know the truth. He also recommended tracking every dollar she spent. I opened a new bank account that afternoon, at a different branch where nobody would recognize me. I transferred exactly half of our savings, just over $11,000, and felt a grim satisfaction at this concrete step. I started a spreadsheet, logging every baby item purchase Icky made, every grocery receipt, every utility bill. The clinical nature of this financial accounting helped me feel like I was building a case, rather than just drowning in betrayal. Each number was another piece of evidence. That evening, I was making dinner when I heard Icky on the phone in the living room, speaking rapid Japanese to her mother. I moved closer to the doorway, pretending to check something in the pantry. I caught her saying something about moving money into her mother's account, just in case. My stomach dropped. She was already thinking about hiding assets. Some part of her suspected, or at least sensed things weren't right. I made a mental note to tell Wallace and to check our account activity daily. I waited until past midnight when she was asleep before opening my laptop in the home office. I logged into our router admin panel using the password I'd set up years ago, a password she never knew existed. The connection logs loaded slowly, weeks of activity. IP addresses, timestamps. I scrolled, looking for patterns. There it was. Starting 3 weeks ago, video calls happening between 11 p.m. and midnight, always after I'd gone to bed. The destination IP address was consistent, the same unknown location every time, sessions lasting 30 to 45 minutes. I took screenshots of every log entry, saving them to a hidden folder, then emailed the files to Maria with a brief message asking her to trace the IP. My hands shook slightly as I hit send. Another piece of evidence, locked down. Maria's response came the next afternoon. The IP address belonged to an apartment complex on the west side of town. She'd pulled the resident directory. Jason Martinez, age 28, Unit 3B. She'd run a background check, too. Sales job at a tech company, no criminal record. Single based on his social media, where he posted gym selfies. I sat in my car during lunch, reading Maria's email, trying to process the bizarre triangle I was stuck in. Icky was pregnant with Matt's baby, married to me, and already setting up her next relationship with Jason. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it wasn't actively destroying my life. That evening, I searched for therapists specializing in betrayal trauma and divorce. I found Devora Gay's profile, kind eyes, gray hair. Her intake form asked about my emotional state, my goals for therapy. I filled it out honestly in a grocery store parking lot, typing on my phone. Angry, hurt, not dangerous, just desperate for a space to process this without falling apart. Dvorak's office called the next morning, and I scheduled my first session. When the day arrived, I left work early. Dvorak met me at the door, shaking my hand. I sat down and started talking, the whole story pouring out in a rush. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me what I hoped to achieve through all this evidence gathering. I told her I wanted to expose Aiki in front of her entire family, make sure everyone knew what she'd done. Dvorak nodded slowly and asked whether that would serve my healing or just my anger. The question hit me harder than I expected. I didn't have a good answer. Over the next week, I started quietly removing things from the house during my lunch breaks. I rented a storage unit across town. First, my parents' photo albums, the leather-bound books my mom had kept for decades. Then the letters my dad wrote to my mom when they were dating, stored in a shoebox. A few pieces of furniture that had belonged to my grandparents. Small items that fit in my car trunk. Each trip felt like dismantling the life I thought I was building, packing away pieces of my history before they could become collateral damage. I photographed everything as I loaded it into the unit, creating a digital inventory. Aiki noticed the missing wedding photo on Thursday evening. She was dusting the living room shelf when she stopped and looked at the empty space. "Where did it go?" she called out, casual but curious. I walked in from the kitchen. "Oh, I took it to get the frame repaired," I said. The corner was coming loose, and I didn't want it to fall and break the glass. She accepted this immediately, nodding and moving on. Her easy acceptance of my lie mirrored exactly how she'd been lying to me for months. I felt a grim satisfaction at turning her own tactics back on her. The photo was actually in my storage unit, wrapped carefully in bubble wrap. Maria called me on Friday with news about Matt. She'd scheduled a meeting with him, using a vague pretext. Matt had agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, and Maria invited me to observe from a distance. I agreed immediately. Saturday morning, I arrived 20 minutes early, claiming a table 3 rows back. I wore my oldest baseball cap and dark sunglasses, a newspaper open in front of me. Matt showed up right on time, a tall guy in his early 30s looking nervous. Maria waved him over. I watched them. At first, he looked confused. Then Maria must have mentioned Icky's name because his whole posture changed. He leaned forward, hands running through his hair, his legs bouncing. He kept shaking his head, his mouth moving rapidly. At one point, he put his face in his hands. After about 40 minutes, Maria shook his hand again. He left through the front door, walking fast. I waited 5 minutes, then joined Maria. She briefed me quickly, her voice low. Matt had admitted everything. The affair, the $5,000 payment. He said Aiki told him she was going to handle it, and he assumed that meant either abortion or passing the baby off as her husband's. He seemed genuinely shocked to learn she was planning to keep the baby and that I might be discovering the truth. Maria had recorded the entire conversation with Matt's permission. She handed me a business card with a code written on the back, the password to access the audio file. That night, I stood in our bathroom after Aiki had gone to bed, staring at my reflection. I tried to practice what I'd say when I finally confronted her. I imagined revealing that I spoke Japanese, watching her face change. I pictured playing the recordings, but every script felt wrong. Too dramatic, too weak. I couldn't find the right tone. After an hour, I gave up and went to bed, lying awake, still practicing impossible conversations. Wallace called early the next morning as I was making coffee. I stepped into the garage to take it. He got straight to business, asking about my work trip plans and the security system. Then he said something that made my blood pressure spike. "You need to be very careful about recording laws in our state," he warned. "Some places require two-party consent. If we're in one, everything you've captured could be illegal, and you could face criminal charges." I sat down on my toolbox, suddenly feeling sick. The thought that all my evidence gathering could backfire hadn't occurred to me. Wallace said he'd look into our specific state laws, but I should hold off on any more recording. I spent the rest of the morning searching online. My hands shook as I scrolled. Finally, around noon, I found it. Our state was a one-party consent state. I could legally record any conversation I was part of or that happened in my own home. The relief hit me so hard I had to put my head between my knees. Wallace called back an hour later to confirm my research, but added a warning. Even though they're legal, judges sometimes view them badly if they look like harassment or setting up your spouse. You need to be smart about what you record and how you present it. The goal is to document genuine behavior, not to trick Aiki. I assured him I understood. 2 days later, I installed the security system while Aiki was at a doctor's appointment. Small cameras in the living room, kitchen, and hallway, each with audio recording, hidden in regular-looking security equipment. The whole setup took about 90 minutes. When Aiki got home, I showed her the new system with what I hoped looked like excited pride. With the baby coming, I explained, I want to make sure our home is as secure as possible, especially when I travel for work. She smiled and hugged me, saying it made her feel safer. She had no idea she'd just approved her own surveillance. That night, during a quiet dinner, I suddenly grabbed her stomach and let out a sharp gasp. Her face went pale, and she doubled over slightly. My fork clattered onto my plate as I jumped up, all my anger and planning forgotten in an instant. "What's wrong?" I asked. She said she was having sharp pains, worse than anything she'd felt before. My hands grabbed my keys and her purse. "We're going to the hospital right now." The drive took 12 minutes, but felt like an hour. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. At the hospital, they wheeled her straight back. I paced. A doctor came out 30 minutes later. "Round ligament pain," he explained, "not labor. Common and harmless." The relief and confusion hit me at the same time. In the hospital waiting room, I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair and watched Aiki doze, her hand resting on her belly. Even in sleep, something shifted in my chest, a confusing mix of tenderness and betrayal that made my throat tight. This was still a person I'd shared 3 years with, someone I'd loved. The complexity of feeling both protective and furious wore me out more than the anger alone ever had. She looked vulnerable, and I hated that part of me still cared. Robert called the next afternoon to check on Aiki. I could hear real concern in his voice. I gave him the medical update. As we talked, I realized with a heavy feeling that Robert was going to be devastated. He'd been nothing but kind, treating me like family. The conversation I'd eventually have to have with him, telling him his grandson wasn't his biological grandson, made me feel sick. He didn't deserve this betrayal any more than I did. 3 days later, I met with Wallace again to finalize the strategy for my fake work trip. He spread out a timeline. "You must not confront Aiki during this period, no matter what you see or hear," he stressed. "The goal is pure documentation. Let her reveal her plans with Jason naturally." He explained that confrontation could look like entrapment. I needed to just watch, record, and document. That evening at dinner, I told Aiki about my work trip, a mandatory training session 3 hours away. She asked only a couple of basic questions, then seemed almost relieved. That relief stung, but it also confirmed everything. She was already planning how to use those 3 days. The night before my fake departure, I packed an overnight bag, enough clothes and toiletries to make it look real, even though I'd only be 20 minutes away at a hotel. The next morning, I kissed her goodbye with the same distant affection I'd been showing for weeks. She told me to drive safely and text her when I arrived, her voice cheerful in a way that made my stomach turn. I drove to a hotel on the other side of town, checked in, and set up my laptop to monitor the camera feeds. Within 3 hours of my departure, I watched as Aiki pulled out her phone and called her mother. Rapid Japanese. I turned up the volume. Aiki told her mom that Jason was coming over tomorrow night. Her mother's voice, with a note of caution, said something felt off about my recent behavior. But Aiki laughed, dismissing the concern. "He's too stupid to figure anything out," she said. "He's probably just stressed about becoming a father." Her mother seemed to accept this. I closed my laptop and stared at the bland hotel wall, letting her words wash over me one more time before I documented everything and sent the file to Wallace. The next morning, I logged into my remote work system, setting up spreadsheets on one monitor while the security camera feeds played on the other. Every hour, I switched to the camera app, watching Aiki move through our house like she was performing a play I'd already read. She made breakfast, scrolled through her phone, watched TV, heated leftovers. At 3, she had a video call, and I zoomed in, seeing her smiling and laughing with someone whose face I couldn't quite make out. The whole day was so normal, so boring it made my stomach hurt. This was my wife doing regular wife things, except she was planning to bring another man over tomorrow, and I was watching her like she was a stranger. Around 6, I closed the work files and got ready for my therapy appointment. Devora met me with her usual calm expression. I told her about the surveillance system, how I was spending my days watching Aiki, waiting for Jason. Devora listened, then asked me what I would do if the evidence wasn't as dramatic as I was expecting. Her question made me pause. I had been so focused on catching her in the worst possible moment. What if there was no smoking gun, just ordinary cheating? Devora leaned forward. She suggested I was framing this as a revenge mission when really I was trying to protect myself from being legally and financially tied to another man's child. Gathering evidence isn't about punishment, she said. It's about establishing truth so you can make informed decisions about your future. The way she explained it made me feel less like some creepy guy spying on his wife, and more like someone taking reasonable steps to protect himself. I wasn't trying to destroy Aiki. I was trying to avoid being destroyed by her lies. When I left her office that night, I felt more grounded than I had in weeks. The second day of my fake work trip began with more remote work and camera monitoring. Aiki seemed more energetic that day, cleaning the kitchen, doing laundry. Around 5, she took a shower and changed into nicer clothes, which made my pulse speed up. I knew what was coming. At exactly 7, the doorbell camera showed Jason walking up to our front door, carrying takeout and a bottle of wine. I watched Aiki open the door, and Jason kissed her right there in the doorway. Not a quick peck, but a real kiss that lasted several seconds. His hand went to her pregnant belly and rested there, like he had every right to touch her. They walked into the living room, and I switched camera views. They settled on the couch, unpacking Chinese food. Their body language was so comfortable, so familiar. This wasn't a first date. This was 2 people who had done this before, many times. They were playing house in my actual house on my couch. I watched them eat and talk for about an hour, unable to hear, but seeing how relaxed they both looked. Then I had to close the laptop. My chest felt tight, my hands were shaking. The intimate domesticity of watching them together was worse than I'd imagined. I grabbed my jacket and went outside, walking circles around the parking lot. The pain I felt right now was the price of protecting my future. I went back inside and saw a text from Maria. I called her. She told me she'd finished her background research on Aiki's family finances. Aiki's mother had filed for bankruptcy 7 years ago and still carried significant credit card debt. This helped explain some of the pressure Aiki might feel to secure financial stability through me, though it didn't excuse anything. Maria said this context might be useful in mediation, showing a pattern of financial desperation. On the 3rd day, I packed up my hotel room and drove home, timing my arrival for after I'd seen Jason leave on the security cameras. I walked in, overnight bag in hand. Aiki came out of the kitchen and hugged me, asking how training went. I gave her boring details about conference rooms and PowerPoint presentations, all completely made up. She seemed relaxed and happy, probably relieved her visit with Jason had gone undetected. We made dinner. She talked about her day, carefully leaving out the part about her boyfriend. That night, she moved closer to me, put her hand on my chest. I rolled away slightly. I'm exhausted from the drive and the long training sessions, I told her. The thought of physical contact with her made my skin crawl. She looked hurt for a second, but didn't push it. I lay awake for hours, counting down the weeks until the baby would be born and I could finally end the charade. The next morning, I called Wallace and scheduled a meeting to review the security footage. In his office, I showed him selected clips. Jason arriving, kissing Aiki, spending the evening. Wallace watched, taking notes, confirming that Jason's presence, combined with the video call logs and Matt's statement, established a clear pattern of ongoing deception. He reminded me that in our state, adultery had limited impact on divorce proceedings, which frustrated me. All this evidence felt important, but legally it wouldn't change much. The real issue was the paternity challenge. Wallace pulled out a legal pad and started drafting a post-birth action plan, immediate paternity testing, legal separation within days of results, requesting temporary orders about property and finances. The most important part, I absolutely could not sign any birth certificate or acknowledgement of paternity forms at the hospital. He stressed this multiple times. I nodded, feeling the weight of what was coming settle over me like a heavy blanket. I spent the next afternoon buried in hospital websites, reading everything about paternity testing. Standard processing took 3 to 5 days, which felt like an eternity. But there was an expedited option. Results in 24 to 48 hours for an extra fee. I didn't hesitate. The cost didn't matter. I bookmarked 3 services and emailed Wallace, asking him to confirm. His response came within an hour. He'd contact the hospital directly to set up the testing protocol and ensure they knew not to present me with paternity acknowledgement forms. Relief washed over me. That Friday, Aiki's mother arrived with 2 suitcases and a bag of baby clothes. I watched from the kitchen as she hugged Aiki, speaking rapid Japanese about how excited she was. I brought them tea, playing my role as the attentive husband, studying their dynamic. Her mother was controlling, constantly touching Aiki's stomach, offering advice. She barely looked at me. When she did, it was for a second before glancing away. I understood. She couldn't face the person she'd helped her daughter deceive. I kept my expression neutral, bringing snacks, acting like I didn't notice the guilt. Saturday evening, Robert came over for dinner. The conversation stayed light until he mentioned something that made everyone go quiet. He'd been setting up a college fund for his future grandchild, putting money aside every month. He wanted to know if we had preferences for the account structure. The table went completely silent. I saw Aiki and her mother exchange a quick glance. They both knew this baby might not be Robert's biological grandchild. All his generous planning for a child with no blood connection to him. The weight of their deception suddenly felt bigger than just what they'd done to me. It extended to Robert, this kind man who'd welcomed me into his family. He kept talking about the fund, completely unaware. I forced myself to respond normally, thanking him, saying we'd contribute once the baby arrived. Aiki's mother excused herself, and I caught the shine of tears in her eyes. After dinner, I asked Robert if I could talk to him, using work decisions as my excuse. We went out to his garage. He listened carefully as I made up questions about career advancement, giving me fatherly advice. Standing there, surrounded by his tools, hearing his genuine concern, I felt overwhelmed by the urge to tell him everything. The words were in my throat. Aiki's affair, Matt, the Japanese conversations where they'd mocked me. But Wallace's warnings echoed. Don't let emotion drive your strategy. So, I swallowed the truth, nodding along. He clapped me on the shoulder. You're going to be a great father. I had to turn away and pretend to examine a table saw, so he wouldn't see my face. Over the next few weeks, Aiki moved into her 3rd trimester. Everything got harder for her physically. I provided practical support, heating pads, extra pillows, but I kept an emotional distance I couldn't quite hide. She noticed, commenting that I seemed different. Each time, I blamed work stress and nervousness about the baby. The truth was, I couldn't connect with her anymore. Every touch felt wrong. Every conversation felt like a performance. The prenatal class happened at the hospital. We sat in a circle with other couples, everyone excited. I felt like an actor, going through motions with no authentic meaning. The instructor asked partners to practice supportive touch. I placed my hands on Ikki's back with clinical detachment, feeling nothing. She gave me a confused look. On the drive home, she asked again if I was okay. I told her I was just processing everything. She seemed to accept this, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I let her. Maria called the following Monday. Her final investigation report was complete. I met her at her office. She handed me a bound document, everything laid out in clear detail. The affair with Matt, bank records, Jason, surveillance footage, router logs, witness statements, the family gathering recordings. I flipped through the pages, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. My wife's betrayal reduced to bullet points and timestamps. Maria warned me again that Wallace was cautious about relying too heavily on surveillance footage, but she'd done her job thoroughly. That week, Devora asked me a question that stopped me cold. What outcome would actually satisfy you at this point? I sat there, trying to articulate an answer. I realized I didn't want Aiki to suffer or be destroyed. I just wanted to be free. Free from the legal obligation of raising another man's child. Free from the financial responsibility of supporting someone who deceived me. Free from being mocked in a language I supposedly didn't understand. Devora helped me work through this. My evidence gathering had been about self-protection, not punishment. This clarity helped me refine my approach with Wallace, focusing on legal protection rather than dramatic exposure. I left Devora's office feeling more grounded than I had in weeks. I created a new email account that evening and began forwarding important documents to it. Financial records, security system footage, Maria's report, Wallace's memos, draft separation papers. Everything I might need if she tried to delete or destroy evidence. I also sent access credentials to both Maria and Wallace. The process took over an hour, but I felt better knowing there were multiple backups. Ikki's due date was now just 2 weeks away. The house filled with baby supplies that felt like props in a theater production. I spent a Saturday assembling the crib Robert had bought, knowing I'd probably never use it. The car seat sat in its box. Tiny clothes hung in the nursery. I moved through these tasks mechanically, setting up a home for a baby I wouldn't be raising. Ikki came in while I was working on the crib. "Are you excited?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. She moved closer, putting her arms around me from behind. I stood there, letting her hold me, staring at the half-assembled crib, counting down the days until I could finally end this performance. Wallace's email arrived on a Thursday morning with the subject line, "Documents for Review." I opened the attachment, the petition for legal separation, the paternity challenge document, formally stating my refusal to acknowledge parentage and requesting DNA testing. Each paragraph was clinical and precise. I made notes, mostly small wording changes. One section requested I not be held financially responsible for medical costs related to the birth. Another asked the court to restrain Aiki from selling or hiding marital assets. I approved everything and emailed Wallace back, authorizing him to file the moment we had paternity test results. 3 nights later, I woke to Aiki shaking my shoulder. Her face was tight with pain. Contractions had started. 2:17 a.m., 7 minutes apart, like the prenatal class had taught. I moved through the house with focused energy, packing her hospital bag. Aiki gripped the bathroom counter during another contraction, and I stood behind her, applying pressure. When it passed, I helped her to the car. She grabbed my hand during the next contraction, squeezing hard enough that my fingers went numb. I squeezed back. Whatever else was true, she was still a human being in real pain, and I couldn't just turn off basic compassion. The hospital admitted her quickly. The contractions were getting stronger. I stayed by the bed, helping her breathe. Robert and Ikki's mother arrived. Robert hugged me, asked how she was doing. The four of us settled into a vigil that probably looked completely normal. Robert in the corner chair. Ikki's mother speaking quietly to her daughter in Japanese. I stayed close to Ikki, wiping her forehead. Several times I caught Robert's eye across the room, and the warmth and gratitude I saw there made my chest physically ache. I knew that look would be gone soon. The baby was born at 6:47 p.m., a boy, 7 pounds 3 ounces. The medical team cleaned him, then placed him on Ikki's chest. The room filled with tears and congratulations. Robert was crying, taking photos. Ikki's mother speaking rapid Japanese about how beautiful he was. The nurses were smiling. I stood slightly apart from the bed, watching this moment that should have been the happiest of my life, but felt more like attending a funeral. Everyone was so focused on the new life that no one noticed I hadn't moved closer or reached out to touch him. About 30 minutes later, a nurse came in with a clipboard. She smiled at me and started explaining the birth certificate paperwork, pointing to the lines where I would need to sign to be listed as the legal father. I looked at the form, then at the nurse, and told her quietly that I wanted to arrange paternity testing before I signed anything. My voice was calm, but the words dropped into the room like stones into still water. Ikki's head snapped toward me, her exhausted face suddenly alert. Her mother started speaking rapidly in Japanese, asking what was happening. What did I just say? I turned to face her and responded in fluent Japanese. I would like to establish paternity before accepting legal responsibility for the child. I watched the color drain from her face as she realized I'd understood every word she and Ikki had spoken for months. The room went completely silent except for the small noises the baby was making. Ikki stared at me. I watched her expression cycle through shock, then fear, then something calculating. Her mother's face had gone white. Robert looked between all of us, clearly sensing something was very wrong. I kept my eyes on Ikki and repeated in English that I was requesting a paternity test, which was my legal right. My voice stayed level and factual. The nurse shifted uncomfortably, then explained that the hospital could collect DNA samples. She pulled out a different form. Ikki just stared at me, tears running down her face. The nurse mentioned expedited processing. I told her I wanted the fastest option available, whatever the additional cost. Ikki started crying harder. Her mother spoke to her in Japanese again, asking what she should do, but I ignored both of them. When the nurse returned, she had 2 sealed collection kits. She swabbed the inside of the baby's cheek, then mine. Both went into a larger envelope. I signed consent forms. When all the paperwork was done, I told Ikki that I would be staying somewhere else until the results came back. I've already packed some of my things from the house, I added. Her mother tried to speak to me in Japanese, perhaps forgetting in her panic that I'd just revealed my fluency. I ignored her completely. I turned to Robert. Can you step into the hallway with me? He nodded, following me out. We walked a little ways down the hall. I told him as gently as I could that there were questions about the baby's paternity. I didn't give him all the details or offer to play him the surveillance footage. I just explained I had reason to believe the child might not be mine, and I needed to establish the truth. Robert's face crumpled. He leaned back against the wall, his hand coming up to cover his mouth. He closed his eyes. Then he opened them and asked me directly, "Do you think Ikki cheated on you?" "Yes," I said. "I have evidence of an affair, and I believe the biological father is someone named Matt." He closed his eyes again, taking several deep breaths. Then he asked, "Are you certain?" I told him about the conversations in Japanese, the private investigator, Matt's admission about the $5,000 payment. I watched Robert's face as I spoke. He seemed to age 10 years. His shoulders sagged. New lines appeared around his eyes. When I finished, he just stood there, staring at the floor, trying to process that his daughter had lied to everyone, and the grandchild he'd been so excited about wasn't biologically his. I left the hospital that night and drove straight to the hotel where I'd been staying during my fake work trip. The room felt different now, less like a hiding place, more like a waiting room for my entire future. My phone buzzed almost immediately with a text from Aiki asking where I was. I typed back that I needed space. She called twice, but I let both calls go to voicemail. The third call came from her mother's number, and I blocked it without listening. Maria texted around 10 p.m. I told her I was fine, just waiting. Wallace sent an email confirming he had the separation papers ready. I turned my phone sound off. The next morning, I woke to 7 missed calls and a dozen text messages. Most were from Aiki. 2 from her mother in broken English, saying I was being cruel. 1 from Robert, asking if I was safe. I responded only to Robert. I spent the day working from the hotel room, taking video calls. Between meetings, I checked my email every 15 minutes. Maria called around lunch. I told her honestly that I felt numb. She said that was normal, that I was in shock, and the waiting was often harder than the knowing. Aiki texted that she was scared. I didn't respond. Her mother texted from a different number. I blocked that one too. Wallace called in the evening to go over the timeline once we had results. He explained that service of papers would happen within hours of filing. He asked if I was prepared for her reaction. Yes, I said. The third day started with my alarm at 6 a.m. I checked my email before I even got out of bed and saw it. The subject line, DNA test results. My hand shook as I opened the attachment. The document was clinical and official, but the conclusion was clear in bold text at the bottom. Based on the genetic analysis, the probability of paternity is 0.001%, effectively excluding the tested man as the biological father. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the screen. I'd known this was coming, but seeing the scientific proof made it real. This was evidence that would hold up in court, that would protect me legally, that would end my marriage and erase any obligation to this child. I felt relief wash over me, then grief right behind it. This was the future I'd imagined for 3 years, the baby I'd prepared for, the family I'd wanted. It was all built on lies. I forwarded the email to Wallace with a one-word message. File! Then to Maria with a thank you. Then I sat in the quiet hotel room and cried, for the first time since this whole thing started. Wallace called 2 hours later to confirm the papers were filed. He explained the documents included legal separation, paternity disestablishment, and a request for temporary orders. Aiki would have 30 days to respond, but the temporary orders hearing would be scheduled within 2 weeks. He asked if I wanted him present when I called Robert. No, I said. I need to do that myself. I pulled up Robert's number and stared at it for 5 minutes before I could make myself press call. He answered on the second ring. I told him the results were in. He said quietly, I believe you. I don't need to see the numbers. I heard him take a shaky breath, and then his voice broke. He asked if I was certain about Matt. Yes, I said. Robert was silent for a long time. I could hear him crying. He finally asked if I planned to tell Matt. I said I was considering it, but hadn't decided yet. Robert said he understood. I'm sorry, he whispered. I raised my daughter better than this. I don't know where I went wrong. I told him this wasn't his fault, and I hoped we could stay in touch. He said he'd like that. The call ended. 3 days after the papers were served, Aiki texted, asking if I would meet her. I agreed to a coffee shop near the hospital, a neutral public place. I got there early. She walked in 15 minutes later, looking smaller than I remembered. Her face was tired. She spotted me and walked over slowly. I waited for her to speak first, but she just stared at her hands. Finally, I started talking in a calm, measured voice. I told her I knew about Matt, about the affair, about the $5,000 he paid her. I told her I knew about Jason and the plans she'd made during my work trip. I told her about all the conversations in Japanese where she'd mocked me. Her face went pale, and she opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I kept going. I understood every word you and your mother said from the very beginning. I speak fluent Japanese, and I've been hiding it because I was embarrassed about my anime phase. I told her I had recordings, witness statements, and now DNA proof that the baby wasn't mine. She started to shake her head, and I held up my hand. I wasn't done. She tried to deny everything at first. I just looked at her and waited. Then she switched to minimizing, saying it was just one mistake with Matt, and Jason was just a friend. I kept my face neutral and said nothing. Then she started blaming her mother. Still, I didn't respond. Finally, she started crying and apologizing, saying she'd made terrible choices, that she was sorry that she still loved me. I listened without interrupting, letting her cycle through every approach until she ran out of things to say. Then I spoke. I explained that the legal process was moving forward. I wouldn't be signing any paternity documents. She needed to contact Matt about his responsibilities. She asked through tears if there was any chance we could work things out. The trust is completely destroyed, I told her honestly. I can't be married to someone who lied to me in a language she thought I didn't understand, who mocked me with her family, who planned to keep extracting money from me while seeing other men. She put her face in her hands and sobbed. I stood up, left money for both our coffees, and walked out. I contacted Matt through Maria the next day, sending him the paternity results and Aiki's contact information. I wrote that I wasn't trying to force him, but he deserved to know the truth. Maria forwarded his response 2 days later. Matt said he needed time to process and consult with his own lawyer. He thanked me and apologized. I wrote back through Maria that I understood and that I had no hard feelings toward him personally. The affair was between him and Aiki, and the child support was between him and the state. I was done with all of it. 2 months later, I was living in a modest apartment across town, a 1-bedroom with decent light and a small balcony. I'd moved my stuff out of the house while Aiki was staying with her mother, taking only what was mine, leaving everything related to the baby. The divorce proceedings were moving slowly. I was attending therapy with Devora every week, working through the betrayal and the grief and the anger. She was helping me separate the legitimate hurt from the destructive revenge fantasies, helping me build a life based on truth instead of deception. I'd enrolled in an advanced Japanese language class at the community college, finally admitting to people that I spoke the language and even explaining why I'd hidden it for so long. My classmates thought the story was wild. Robert and I met for coffee every couple of weeks. 2 men processing grief and betrayal together. We didn't talk much about Aiki or the baby, just shared the quiet understanding of people who'd both lost something. Our relationship would never be what it was when he thought I was going to be his son-in-law, but there was a respect between us that felt honest. I wasn't fine yet. Some days were harder than others. I'd wake up angry or sad or just numb, but I was free from the gaslighting, the mockery, the elaborate deception. I was building a life where I didn't have to pretend or hide or play dumb. That freedom was worth every bit of pain it took to get here. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.